Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My goodness, I thought we just had a tea break. Good afternoon. That's better. I hope we're all enjoying the World AI Summit. As mentioned, my name is Laura Chite, and I'm going to be the moderator for this very challenging panel. I was just complaining to the MC. I don't know how he expects me to climb the seat. In fact, I'm very jealous of Lesley. She just leaped, and she was seated right there. But I think I do look forward to us having a very interesting panel discussion. This is a very sensitive thing to us, Kenyans, the Big Four agenda, and we look forward to the expertise of the panelists. So before I ask my panelists to say something small, I kind of looked at the room and I was like, you know, sometimes people in the technical world assume everybody knows the jargon, okay? I believe we have a mixed audience. So I have decided, from my perspective, I am going to define what AI is, the way I understand it as a business person. Yeah? Good, I see a few people agree with me. So, artificial intelligence and not artificial insemination from an agricultural perspective. It is computer technology simulating human intelligence. It is the outcome of machine learning from correlations from huge sets of data. As the PS was giving his speech and as the keynote was being done, and even the first panel on finance, there was a lot of discussion around data. So data is key to this. It will often be used to replace and or complement human decision making. So, data, machine learning, AI. That's how it correlates. But the most important thing for making artificial intelligence relevant to us as Africans, to us as Kenyans, is the data must be local for it to have an impact locally. You heard about the keynote. The data must be local. So it is critical for us to ensure that it is locally relevant to make the appropriate decision making. Can I get an amen? Amen. All right. On that note, I'd like my panelists to introduce themselves and just give us a 30-second brief of who you are and your role in the task force. Ladies first.
Good afternoon. My name is Lesley Mbogo. I am a member of the task force with the Ministry of ICT. Our task force is on artificial intelligence, blockchain, and basically emerging technologies. And I serve on the board with these two very honorable gentlemen. I am a product and engineering executive, and I've been my experiences in delivering mobile solutions, cloud-based solutions to businesses as well as software enterprise. And I've had over 14 years of experience basically building and managing technology products at massive scale at companies such as IBM, Amazon, Nomura Securities, and here at home at Mkopa Solar. Currently, I am a co-founder at a startup called GoBEBA, which is an e-commerce logistics platform. Throughout my career, I've been in technology, and through my career, I've done a lot in terms of innovation. I've filed 4 patents at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and I'm glad to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesley. Dr. Bitange.
Yes. My name is Bitange Ndemo. I'm a teacher by profession and largely a consumer. And I'm one of the people who started World Data Lab. You can go either to World Data Lab or World Poverty Clock or population.io. Some of it would help you to know when you will die.
Honorable Onyango.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, so my name is Michael Onyango, as you have heard, and what I do is I work around connecting and ensuring that Africa's forgotten bottom millions can use emerging technologies to have better livelihoods. In the interest of time, if you'd like to know a little bit more about me, Google me. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see, this is going to be the fun panel, just judging from the introduction of my panelists. So, Dr. Ndemo, I'll start with you. I'd like for you to just give us a status report of where or a status brief of where the AI task force is today.
It is in Nairobi, yeah?
That is location. I wanted brief.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you wanted. I think we have actually finished with the report, and what it's going through the process of production, and then we are waiting to know the formal launch. And some of what the permanent secretary was talking here are some of the recommendations from the report. For example, the application of AI and blockchain in government. Government actually has started implementation of some of what is required to have a trusted identity in a digital economy. They have started the Huduma number. So some of the processes are going forward because it's very key that we have biometric identity as we move towards a digital economy.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to add anything else? Are you comfortable, Michael?
Yeah, I think the other thing that he just probably left out is the sandboxes that you're probably seeing now operating, like from CMA. Those are things which are actually some of the recommendations that were in our report. And because the principal secretary mentioned them, I can also now mention them publicly. The rest, of course, we will wait for the formal launch. And as our chair has said, you'll be able to actually look at the various areas that we've looked at specifically on the Big Four and other things that we have recommended for this country.
Okay. Lesley, how do we prepare our country and our citizens? Because the way I look at AI, it's like this elite thing that if I went to talk to maybe somebody in the rural area, they'll just never understand. And anyway, it's just generally a technology problem, okay? So how do we prepare our country to be able to embrace this? And especially considering the Big Four agenda and the impact it's going to have to the citizens of this country. How do we prepare our citizens? How do we get them to participate? How do we get them to embrace this?
As you mentioned, it is a technology. But what we really are looking at is the result of what that technology does. So today, when you drive your car, you may not know the carburetor and all those things that work behind the engine, but at the end of the day, the car is taking you from point A to point B. So much when we look at these technologies, we're looking at the end result of what we're trying to do. So if we look at our Big Four agenda, which is really important for us, right? Those are things that these technologies will help us get there. So one example would be, for example, even the PS mentioned it. In housing, for example, so one of the ways, for example, we can do with AI is be able to use AI, and we talked about data, right? AI, data is central to AI. So you can use artificial intelligence to do proper population planning, be able to even predict where population is going to grow, and then now pick the proper locations of where those houses can be built, so that now people having access to housing is not just made on a decision today, it's also looking at predictively where the population will go. And so these are things that, the end result is that, people ultimately will be able to get houses, not so much the day-to-day definition of AI as a technology. It's what the technology does, and the end result is what's really important. So we want to continue communicating all these the benefits that we're going to get and how we're going to use AI in facilitating the Big Four agenda, as well as even private sector benefits there are. So that's really the key communication here, is what are we trying to achieve by using these technologies? Of course, people need to understand where we're going. Why are we having these Huduma numbers, right? Again, it's to get back and tell people, if we are going to be a digital economy, we do need to have this building block. And the building block is that we do need to have a digital identity. So some of these things have to be explained, but it's a journey towards getting us to a digital economy.
So I like the fact that you brought up Huduma number and talking about explaining. Dr. Ndemo, recently in the CIO East Africa magazine, you wrote an article around why we should embrace the Huduma number, because we all know that we are complaining about it. We're complaining about it. And if we are complaining about it, I don't know how it's going to be in the grassroots. So could you just talk us through why this thing is important in the bigger picture, why Kenyans should embrace it, the impact of it in the Big Four agenda? Yes, we've talked about providing services, but even from a healthcare perspective, what does it mean for me?
Yes, I would add on what Lesley talked about. At some point, there is a section of Nairobi called Umoja. It was built for the poor, but the people who bought the houses were the rich. There was no way of knowing, because they brought their relatives, put their names and stuff, and finished that. We never got affordable income. But what is going to happen with this Huduma number with AI is that nobody would cheat. If I went and bought 6 of the houses through the blockchain, Michael would ask, why would you squeeze yourself in such? We did not have that technology to manage that. NHIF, that is National Hospital Insurance Fund, is being abused even before we realize the Big Four agenda in healthcare. It's going to be very difficult for a man to use like they do now. And I've seen somebody in hospital admitted using someone's identity. If for some reason that person dies, is when you come to see, please, he's not the one who died. The one who died is this one. So if you have that identity, you would eliminate that level of corruption. Food, tracking and tracing food from source to where you buy things, you would now be able to know that I'm actually buying a genuine thing. That is food security. It helps us in that aspect. So what is happening is that we are moving from very old technologies which you didn't identify. Credit is going to be much, much more easy, because you can check who Ndemo is and what he has been doing, and on the basis of that. And actually what you see from Tala, Branch to Fuliza, they don't use what the banks used to use before. The banks, anytime you went as a bank trainees, they will tell you, understand the 4 C's, the customer, the whatever. When you need money from this mobile lending, you just put your name there and they tell you, we can give you this much credit. They are using big data to analyze whether you are honest or not. So things are changing to another level, and there will be a lot of disruptions in the process, but we hope that blockchain would help us, especially here, where we know how to cheat in elections. So, because instead of counting, if everybody is linked to the block, we would know, I voted here, this is the number, and by the close time, we know who is the winner. I hope the politicians would accept.
They'll accept because technology is supposed to be transparent. Michael, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So when I think about AI and manufacturing, which is one of our big four agenda, I'm thinking robotics. I don't know if I'm thinking right. I don't know if I'm thinking wrong. Could you maybe give us some insights as to how that specific agenda item can be achieved using artificial intelligence? Besides maybe robotics, maybe you want to talk a little bit more around that, and how it would transform, especially things like creation of jobs in this country.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good. So AI, manufacturing, jobs, what's the link? A lot of people, like you said, straight away will think that, robotics, and the first thing is that less people doing work and less people in the factory. But it's interesting. A lot of the, what is being manufactured and where it is being used or where it's being consumed. So there's a lot of things around AI. So when you look at manufacturing, you cannot just look at the process itself. You must look at the holistic process all the way to the consumer, back to retail, and the whole process in place. So a lot of AI is actually involved in, beyond just the manufacturing itself. So, for example, the amount of, let's talk about company Y, which most probably is manufacturing oil, cooking oil. And company Y would like to ensure that within, county number 37, how do I ensure that, or how do I know exactly who my consumers are and how much of my product should I actually have, for example, at a depot that's in Kilifi. Now, through the collection from big data, there's a lot of information that you can actually reverse engineer so that then the manufacturing process actually becomes more competitive and the wastage is actually less. And you'll find that there's a whole lot of new jobs that get created in now the whole distribution outlet. And this distribution is based because now, for example, ordinarily the manufacturer may have had wholesalers that were in between, but because of big data and because of knowing what the consumers want in a particular destination, like I mentioned, Kilifi, the people in Kilifi can actually start creating their own jobs and their own networks in terms of distributing that particular product and others for themselves. Yes.
Okay. Let me add on.
Yeah.
On
Go ahead.
that,
Go ahead. Yeah.
The average age of a Kenyan is 19 years. Mm-hmm. The average age in EU is 50. Of course, they are worried who would manufacture the days to come. They have to do robotics. But those robots are actually monitored here. In Turkana, you can find one working in a factory in Germany. So German could doing what they're doing, but the back end is being done here with somebody who has no idea what a Volkswagen looks like. But they need to be trained on some specifics. And some of the AI solutions, look at me, my size. I was in California 2 months ago, and there's this new Honda. The guy was driving and told me, even if I turned it this way, it would not turn. So the car uses AI to know the proximity of the other vehicles. So if I was typing my SMS and the steering, it can't go. It knows you're stupid, you're making silly mistakes, and it remains. That's how we are getting safety that we didn't have before by simple mistakes that we make on the highway. Some, it can't knock the other vehicle in front. It will slow down by itself. Of course, there are downsides like Boeing now. They've more than automated that it went beyond. So those are things that we need to look at. But by and large, AI is going to help us on many things. that we can leapfrog ourselves. What you need to add to what you are talking about is also 3D printing, that I can create a prototype which I used to take to Japan to do it and pay so much money. So we I'm saying here, we can leapfrog and go to another level because of these technologies. There are several other areas of AI which we are going to discuss after this, like machine learning and what it's done to us in terms of helping citizens from the poor to everything.
And I actually also wanted to add an example on employment. So you talked again about AI and data. Data is very critical to AI. So as Prof said here, AI requires to be trained. The way AI works is that you feed it data, it trains, and it continues learning and improving. There's a company, I believe it's called Cloud Factory here. What they actually do is they hire Kenyans to actually train a lot of that AI that Prof is talking about, like with cars, being able to identify. So it might be a simple task where you're training the AI to recognize images, for example. So you have these young kids from college. They do these jobs where they train the AI to say, okay, this is an image of X. So it trains that AI. So a lot of these things are also creating jobs locally here, but some of the applications are actually being done outside. So what that company does is usually they contract companies, say in the US and elsewhere, but they use local labor to be able to train that AI. So there are jobs being created. The second example in terms of manufacturing, an example that when you think about in a factory, for example, AI can actually be used to predict like how machines perform. For example, if a machine is going to fail, you can actually have AI help to determine that. So those are things to help with productivity in a factory. So maybe there's not a guy who come and inspect that. It might be something that says, this machine is about to fail, but that just means that we have more productivity, and every time you have more productivity, people do better, consumers have more to spend, and therefore we find more jobs, more things that come out. So again, it's not always a replacement, it's that it just transforms into something else.
Can I spend a minute on this? Because I know there are so many people who are anti-AI before understanding precisely what it is. Because every time I say AI, but it's taking jobs, before you finish saying what it does. In Nairobi here, we have a school called Shule, which leverages on adaptive learning. Adaptive learning is, and actually we are getting there in this competence-based learning, that the previous methods that we used to teach, and the way God created us, 30% of us have some kasoro. Kasoro means you have some not the defect, not shortcoming. And I've been teaching for the last 25 years, and I actually see it. When I teach, if there are 50 students, there's some 5% you actually don't need to teach. They are ahead of you. There is another 10, 15, 20% whom after you teach, you see them, they open up. There is another which you have to spend a bit of time. And there's a percentage which I usually pray to God that they can catch up. That percentage is not that they are foolish. Is either they are autistic and they don't know, or have ADHD, or are dyslexic. But you can get their speed if you stayed with them. But we don't have a lot of time to find out what their problem is. So we have been actually consigning these people to oblivion but this technology can just look into your eyes and classify you like you need a little bit of time with teachers. Then you can actually go find, help yourself. Of course, you would end up being at the same level as the other students. But that technology would help us to get into this adaptive learning. It's already here. That's one. On employment, while we are complaining, there are companies that have come here willing to translate our language into a way that you talk your language and I talk mine, but we understand each other. Now, when you go to France nowadays, you don't have to know the French language, but you can talk to the waiter and know the food you want, you know. Previously, they brought some macaroni and then you ask, I didn't order this one. It's because you didn't understand the language. Imagine if we translated our language such that when the politicians talk, it actually means what they talk. Yeah? Actually, this is the most serious point I was making. The reason why I'm saying this is that the word productivity is not in our vernacular language. So when they say in a public function, we want you to become more productive in farming, they whisper to each other, we need to go and make more children, produce more children. But we need, it is very true. It's actually very true. Do you know what break even is in your language?
I have no idea, plus the word maintenance.
Yes.
Because everything in Africa falls apart.
You begin to understand that we have been operating in several worlds, that AI would end up helping us, that if I said this, I actually meant this. Yeah? Even marriage in this country, when a woman says no, is when you stick on. Did I lie?
Prof.
Did I lie?
We'll have a side chat on that, whether you lied or not. But you know, you made me feel a bit lost when you pointed at me and said, that machine can look at you and decide whether you should see the teacher more often or not. I started wondering, is my IQ looking a bit off when I'm up here?
Oh no, they can't see. They don't have the.
Okay.
They don't have the software.
Okay. And Sophia is not in the room. Okay, so Michael, I want to go to you a little bit. We are talking about AI and data being so important. How much are we plugging in to all the different data sets that are being collected in this country today? And when I say that, I'm talking about, like, the census is coming up. How much guidance did the task force give on the required data that we need around achieving the big four agenda? You talked about retail, manufacturing. You know, how much have we plugged in across the board? Have we started? Are we doing a sample? You know, what's going on?
So one of the things that I'd like to get very clear, and I want people in this room to know, is that we need to own our future. And this thing that government somewhere needs to be doing this and getting the data sets in order so that we can do this will go nowhere. It actually lies with us. So you should ask yourself, why is it that, like Lesley just mentioned, Cloud Factory, why is it that everybody else is coming here to make use of our data and the data that is already available and actually making an income out of it? What are we, those of us sitting in this room, not doing or do not understand? It is very nice and very comfortable to sit and say, you know, government needs to do this more and government needs to do this, but then governments don't drive. It is very rarely that, you know, that government drive the agenda unless you give that to them. Of course, they are the we must admit, they are the exceptions. There's the dragon that's just woken up in China, but it's interesting when you speak to Chinese themselves, you actually find out that it's actually all the things that are happening amongst the citizenry and businesses. So I'll throw that back and say that it's actually not a government agenda. There are enough data sets as they were. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, why is it that the Talas and the branches have come here and have managed to use and navigate? And what is it that we must start understanding and start navigating for ourselves so that our future in this field of AI is actually being owned by ourselves without sitting pretty and sitting comfortably and pointing a finger at government. So that's actually my take on that. Yes.
All right. That's, you've thrown a spanner in the works, which is good. Food for thought for all of us, you know. Intelligent minds sitting here. I'm sure if even 25% of the room did something, it would be transformative for us as a country. Dr. Bitange, you want to say something?
The world has become a very tiny village. As we sit here, there are satellites going up here studying us. The company that I told you, World Data Lab, you are not listening.
I'm trying to manage your time.
Okay. Okay. The company I talked about, World Data Lab, we use machine learning, satellites. We can estimate the population of this country. We have done so for North Korea, which didn't give data, but we are able to use those machines, to use the satellites and be able to predict. What I'm telling you, the data that has been collected about us is so much out there. We need to know about that data. And because it's free, some of the satellites, the EU, the US, it's actually free. And some people have used it to predict rainfall patterns and stuff like that. So there is much more we need. We must begin to develop capacity. Capacity to know that this is happening. I don't need to ask you for your data. But I can gather the data if I wanted. Yeah.
Okay. So Lesley, it's interesting you mentioned Cloud Factory. So my brother comes home one day and he tells me he has a job. I ask him, where are you working? He says Cloud Factory. I'm like, I've never heard of that company. And I'm in the technology world. That just shows how much we are living in a bubble. We need to take control of what's happening here. Closing remarks from you, Lesley?
So for us, I think when we're thinking as a task force, I think there's a lot of opportunity. You've had quite a lot about the fourth industrial revolution. And today, I think we're in a different position. It used to be that years ago, we didn't even have connectivity, right? So Dr. Ndemo here worked through that. Connectivity in Kenya is not really an issue. In fact, today I think we rank the 14th in the world in mobile connectivity speeds. When you come to our population, right, we have an educated population. People are internet savvy. Smartphones are cheaper now. I think smartphone penetration is about 60%. Internet penetration is, I think, about 85%, and that's primarily due to people having access to mobile. So really the reasons we couldn't be up to speed with the rest of the other emerging economies is we did have issues with infrastructure and those kinds of things. But I think now with having the connectivity pretty much almost sorted out through this country, we really are in a position to start leveraging a lot of these things. So it comes to us building our own skills, right? And it's not about building skills that they have to be taught in school. I mean, nowadays, access to information is available online. It used to be back then only the people in the know would be able to have access to certain information, but that's not the case anymore. So I think we are in a position where, as a country, we are able to leverage this new technology. There's really no reason why we can say today in Kenya that we're not able to actually now start to participate in this fourth industrial revolution in terms of technology, in terms of building our skills. So the message is that we are able to do these things today, and we don't have the same excuses, or limitations that we used to have years ago. That's what really where we want to drive this. So what we're working on the task force, these are all opportunities even for businesses to start looking at. So that's what I would say primarily. I think we're in a great position to really start leveraging these technologies, and as a country, we have the infrastructure, we have smart people, we have a huge educated population. And that's what we want to drive the message we want to drive.
All right, thanks, Lesley. Michael, closing remarks?
Sure. So I think as Kenya, we need to realize that people around us have woken up. and we're no longer in the beautiful position that we thought we were. Actually, a lot of us, in fact, just by a show of us, a hand, anybody in this room who was born after 1981? 1981. Okay, so great, we're not doing too badly. I'm happy that we're finally having, the next generation within the conversation. So it's very important that, we must realize that our neighbors have woken up, and they've really woken up. They're running. We are not. If anything, I think we're running backwards. So there needs to be far much more collaborative efforts between businesses, and you should stop this silos of trying to work alone. That's going to be very, very important and very, very critical. And then, in terms of our education, I think in terms of our skill sets, we need to think about skilling, reskilling, and upskilling within the field of AI, and we need to be very purposeful about it. We need to be clear. What is it? AI is very large and wide. So within the field of AI, where exactly is it that we want to do as a nation, as a country, and therefore concentrate all our efforts there and stop this thing of being scatterbrained and trying to be everything to everybody.
Thank you, Michael. One last closing remark. Dr. Ndemo, I'm giving you 45 seconds.
Okay.
Because I know you're speaking tomorrow again.
No.
Okay, I'm giving you 45 seconds.
Yes. I keep on calling myself a technology evangelist. And one thing that I want everybody in Africa to understand, I think the rest of the world is getting tired of us. And you are seeing a lot of young people being sold as slaves, dying in the Mediterranean. It should not happen. It should not happen. We should look at these young people as an opportunity. Exploit the opportunity to provide services to the entire world. We have the opportunity in the fourth industrial revolution, which is underpinned by these technologies we're talking about, AI, blockchain, 3D printing, whatnot, all those. We must develop the necessary capacity that anybody in the world would say, go to Kenya if you want this. Like everybody in the world now saying, go to India, you would get programmers in this. India is 1.3 billion. They have slowed down their birth rate. We're at 1.1. We should be 1.6 and be like India so that we can provide services to the entire world. We develop capacity. But if we start the narrative that, oh, this is going to get jobs, we can't do this, the government has brought a system that will take us there. Look at how many scared people around competence-based learning. We are fighting it. We are fighting it, and we know this is what we need to change the world. Why can't we say that we are the ones changing the world? Yeah? Sorry, we have finished. Yeah. I'm done.
I think this panel is so interesting that we feel cheated. We really do. You feel cheated, right? The audience. So next time, give us more time. Thank you so much to my panelists. A round of applause to them. And enjoy the rest of the summit.